So what I do with the kids who come in, I will often say, why are you coming to see me? And they'll say, I don't know. I said, didn't your mum and dad tell you? No. Did they ever tell you anything? No. So I'll often say, well, is it because of problems at school? Yeah. And did your mum and dad tell you that you were coming here to learn how to draw Bart Simpson? What? Yeah, we're going to draw Bart Simpson before you leave. And we end up drawing Bart Simpson. And the principal rule here is that 3-year-olds draw circles, 4-year-olds draw squares, and 5-year-olds draw triangles. So if you can draw a triangle, you can draw Bart Simpson. It's all circles and squares. And we start off halfway through it, and then suddenly it starts to fall into shape. And they're going, oh my God. And they've actually literally drawn Bart Simpson. I said, right, spell Bart. B-A-R-T. So let's use Bart as a way of trying to figure out why you're here. Are you here sometimes because your behavior gets you in trouble? Well, sometimes. And are you sometimes here because you've been blaming other people when things go wrong? Just sometimes. And sometimes, do you have a bit of an attitude problem? Well, it's just sometimes. My brother has it worse. And are you sometimes, or refuse to do homework, chores around the house? Not always, not always. And we work our way through. So the T is teasing, tormenting your little brother or sister. What we're going to do is we're going to change you. And instead of blaming, you're going to have to believe in things again. Your parents are going to believe in you. And you're going to be bright and enthusiastic. And we're going to change you from having an attitude problem to being assertive. Being assertive means you stand up properly, talk for yourself. And the R is going to get respect. And do you know what the basic building blocks are of respect? No. It's please and thank you. It starts when you're about 1. And we continue to do it. And this is not really so much for the kid as it is for the parents, because we're reframing what we want them to do. The most important thing is that they continue to believe in their kid. And in the relationship, they need to continue to believe in their relationship that can get it right. And they've got to stop blaming. And suddenly you're stepping this and said, you need to learn the skills to teach your kid these skills so they're ready when they're 16 and 17 when they leave home.
Hello, I'm Patrick McKenna, and this is a story. Do you like stories? Well, tough. Once upon a time, there was a little boy who had ADHD. His name was Patrick McKenna. Oh, this is a good story, because I'm identifying with the lead character already. But nobody realized that Patrick had ADHD, so everyone thought he was just mischievous. Mischievous is a special grown-up word for bad. Patrick was quite handsome, and let's be honest, brilliant. And so, without any help at all, he grew older. Then he met a beautiful princess and they fell in love and lived happily ever after. Oh, see, that's really nice. Isn't that nice? For the first few years. Then Patrick became a parent thanks to some magic beans. Now he was a parent with ADHD and a parent of a child with ADHD. This is a really long story and it could use pictures. I love books with pictures. If it has pictures, you know what the moral of the story is here? There are challenges for families with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And on this program, we have some of the world's best experts exploring the biggest challenges of parenting ADHD and the opportunities of parenting a child with ADHD. Some are obvious, some are not.
So it does come back to communication in relationships, and when the other person doesn't understand what it is and does not know how to live with it, it's a bit like looking for a black cat in a dark room. They're never sure what to expect. Sometimes they're getting scratched and sometimes they get a major scratch. It's not a little kitten, you've got a rip-roaring lion in there.
An ADHD parent, I think they sort of fall into a few different categories of the challenges that they face. Either they're struggling with ADD themselves, and so they are sort of torn between wanting to have compassion for their kids and really just already being over their heads and having a really hard time managing it. Because, what do they tell us parents we have to do? We have to have structure and we have to be consistent, which is a really hard thing to do if you're ADD yourself, and that's what our kids need the most. So I think we have this one realm of parents that are just overwhelmed, and often they've got it themselves. And then you've got this other realm of parents who are more, this is an overstatement, but more type A kinds of parents who are organized and structured, and they just don't get this kid at all. they just can't really relate, and they can't figure out why the kid can't just do what they've asked him to do, you know? And so their challenges and what they're struggling with is, it's sort of like one side is overwhelm and one side is frustration, right? And so we have to manage it and deal with it differently depending on where they're coming from.
By the way, as you watch this program and every time you review it again, you'll probably hear something new. And I know right now as a parent you're struggling, you're angry, frustrated, sad, maybe even just burned out. My request is that you let go of despair for a moment and listen for what's possible. Listen for how to improve their experience of childhood and your experience of parenthood. I was officially diagnosed with ADHD as part of the making of the documentary ADD and Loving It. The diagnosis brought up a lot of stuff from my own childhood. Some painful stuff for myself and for my wife, Janis. When undiagnosed and untreated, ADHD can sabotage every area of your life.
The kids who come through my front door are kids whose ADHD is not a gift for them. Nobody comes here because they have nothing better to do. So by the time you're coming through my front door, it's getting in the way of your relationship with friends, your relationship with siblings, your relationship with your parents. It's getting in the way of your completing work.
It's not like Mendelian genetics where you can say you've got two blue-eyed parents and that you're going to get all blue-eyed children, and you know, two browns, this is what you're going to get. It's not that simple, but we know that it runs in families.
And I can remember any time, perhaps I was talking to my mother-in-law on the phone and said, oh my goodness, you know, I was expecting Brendan home right after school today and he didn't come home on time and I was so worried. She'd laugh, I wish that on you so much, because she'd been through so much, and I think she did hope that someday Patrick would have to deal with the same things that she did, you know. And I used to at first I'd think, why is she laughing? I was so upset, and then I realized really it was payback for Patrick. It was, yeah.
In educating ourselves about ADHD, my wife and I realized, despite what we've been told by some very well-meaning people, this wasn't a charming quirk or foible or character flaw.
So the parent may complain that the child is lazy. Well, ADHD is a difficulty with forced effort. Or the child may complain that he's bored. The difficulty he's describing is that the normal level of stimulation, which we would be comfortable with, isn't sufficient to hold him. Or a third difficulty that might be described as a brother or a sister might say he's buggy. In other words, he's always at them, he's always talking, he's always fidgeting, he's always squirming. So these are descriptions of patterns of behavior that really leave a stamp on an individual's success as they go through the life cycle.
But in getting a reliable diagnosis, I could also appreciate how far I'd come and how well things had turned out for me. I was lucky. What also came up for me, and I think comes up for a lot of people who get diagnosed later in life, was if I had only known sooner.
When I found out that I had ADD, the first thing was anger. The first emotion was anger, really. I was very angry at everybody else for missing this one, for not being there for me. And then my mom, I was very angry with her. Sometimes now I'm still very angry at her because she still has a hard time admitting that there was something wrong with me. But not because it was me who was wrong. There was a disorder. There was something that could actually have been diagnosed. It could have been diagnosed, but it wasn't.
I mean, it's pretty tough to overcome something you can't see and you have no idea it exists. Whereas knowing your brain style, well, that can be liberating, miraculous. It was for me. So our goal here is to give you the knowledge that we wish we had been given when we had young kids, or when we were young kids.
I'd say to the children's parents that, you know, maybe you've had ADD, maybe you've struggled with it, and you look at your kid and you say, oh God, I don't want them to go through what I went through. And I want to tell you that it's a different deal for the kids. There's a lot more awareness. It's not the same thing as growing up with this weird thing that you don't know what it is. They're going to be ahead of the game. They're going to be okay.
Well, I always tell parents that it's a chronic condition. You have to think about it as a chronic condition. But also, you know, let them know that ADD doesn't define the person. You know, so it's not Johnny's ADD, is Johnny has ADD. Johnny's Johnny. And what we want to look at is how does ADD affect Johnny? And it may be the same or different from others, but we want to know who Johnny is because that's what's most important. I think kids actually really appreciate that.
Children go from being outsiders, from being ostracized, from being impulsive, distracted, not having friends, always disrupting in the class, to being functional. And more importantly, the kids start to feel competent as individuals. And I think as human beings, that's really what people want to understand, is that they are feeling heard and that they are understood by the world.
And depending how you manage this trait, it's very interesting in that it can become a tremendous asset in your life or a tremendous liability. Really think it's important to embrace a strength-based approach that does not in any way deny there is a downside, but that emphasizes the positive as a way of developing the positive. Because you're going to do much better at developing your positive qualities if you do it in a context of hope and enthusiasm.
I think it's really important to reassure any child that they can be whatever they want to be, that when you're a young person, you're going to grow up and it's going to get better. It's always going to get better. You have to believe it's going to get better and want that.
Okay, so we all want our kids to be strong. That way they can pursue their dreams and achieve their goals. See, building on their strengths is a key factor in the success of ADHD children.
For a child, for example, who's really struggling in school, make sure they have other outlets in their lives as best we can that come more naturally and come more easily, so that school doesn't just take over things. So some of it can be ways we focus on praise. Some of it can be the sort of activities we seek out. Some of it can be focusing on reward systems over punishment. I mean, all these things start to add up, so the balance swings back to more success in everyday life and more positive feedback in everyday life.
Unfortunately, self-esteem is often fragile from all the screw-ups. But fortunately, the more they're able to focus on what they can do well, the more they feel confident to move forward, even in the face of problems at school or with friends. Strengths. That's where the money is. That's where the gold is, in their strengths.
So for example, if a child says, I've never been invited to a birthday party, I may ask how they do with animals, because many children with ADHD socialize beautifully with grandparents or with a single adolescent or with a younger sister or a baby, and point out the strengths of what they do well.
So you look at what are the strengths of that person. What do they like? What do they want to do in their life? And how can you, as a clinician or as a mother or as a father, help that person go in that direction with all the tools that we have? Because now we have a lot of tools to help those children and adults.
It's important to help them see the positive. So our conversation is, your son worked really hard on the testing. We can see that he's really working hard, he's doing his best, and this is what he can do in that context. We like to look for aspects of the child that we enjoy, whether they're charming or easy to get along with or cooperative. We want the family to know that in the right setting, this is what their youngster is like.
Once you put that positive spin on ADD, you realize the list of positives are far outweigh the potential negatives.
So we teach parents and teachers how to follow up on that in a positive way. Not a negative consequence kind of approach, but a positive consequence kind of approach. ADHD kids seem to benefit from and to need more frequent rewards, more immediate consequences. They seem to need more direct, specific commands, if you will, or specific directions on what to do next in a step-by-step manner, and not to leave them to go several steps before you intervene.
That difficulty, that resistance to moving into an activity that's ADHD unfriendly, that requires forced effort, is so profound that it creates an intensity of conflict and difficulty that's very, very hard to live with, both for the child and for the parent.
Children need to feel unconditional love and acceptance. However, children also need to learn how the real world works. You teach them about crosswalks, right? And seatbelts. You prepare them. You do, I know. We also need to teach them about how to get the things they want by earning them.
So we're going to have to talk about it. This is like a soccer game or a hockey game. You've got a coach, okay? And a good coach will say, we're playing such a team on Saturday. We need to know who they are. I don't want you guys going out and giving penalties and getting sent off. I cannot win if you're in the penalty box. You've got to be playing for me. I'm the coach. You may be the best player out there. That's tough. I'm making all the plays. It's college football. And you reinforce this with the parents. But any decision goes if it's been well planned and well thought out. So we're going to have to stop this sort of impulsive decisions, the impulsive parenting, the impulsive comments to the other person.
Parenting is a bit like mentoring a child into adulthood. It's about teaching them the reality of the world without overwhelming them or making them afraid of it. And part of that reality is developing a work ethic.
The first thing that I address with the parents is the behavioral help children can get, because we don't want them growing up with this sense of guilt of not knowing how to do the thing right or things right, and being told that, you know, they're not good enough, or that, you know, they just have to be like everybody else when they're not.
And we've also sat down at certain points and acknowledged how we wanted to raise our child, and that we were going to be positive reinforcing parents.
Mm-hmm.
And there was times we had to remind each other of that.
Everything is self-esteem with kids. The single biggest predictor of a child's future success as an adult, and there have been a lot of really good studies on this, the single most consistent predictor of adult success among children is self-esteem. It's not intelligence. It's not any particular type of neurology.
It's not easy, but it's crucial. Many studies have shown kids with undiagnosed, untreated ADHD have lower self-esteem. Why? Well, what builds self-esteem? It's the same for adults as it is kids.
Success. So when you treat ADHD, you have to aim for success.
People who believe that they can accomplish things will accomplish things. People who believe that they can't accomplish things won't accomplish things.
We need to help parents catch their child doing something good. We need to help children catch their parents doing something good. And the first and most important message to any family coming into my office is the courage and creativity that they've already shown and that we have to work with as we go forward.
So you're always having to explain things in context. They don't have the skills to describe it or to know it. I can go to a hockey game. I never grew up playing hockey. And you know a good hockey team versus a bad one. But I can't tell you why it's good. That's the coach's job. So you need to get the right coach to work with these families. And if the coach doesn't understand ADHD, well, they should go back and coach hockey instead.